So, as you know, Victoria, as we suggested last night, is locked down for a week from tonight, and it's a disgrace. I'm sick of holding back on this, sick of giving politicians and the media the benefit of the doubt because we're all living through trying circumstances. We've been dealing with this pandemic for almost a year and a half. We've seen media hysteria from day one, never waning, and we've seen mistake upon mistake from the Victorian and other state governments. Yet they failed to learn, and worse than that, they refused to learn. This lockdown is less to do with protecting public health and more to do with protecting politicians. The Victorian government, like every state government except New South Wales, is running a de facto elimination strategy, afraid that any infections will count as a political strike against them. So they put the pain onto people, onto families, on workers, on especially casual workers, on communities. The politicians shift all of the pain onto those people to protect their undeclared virus elimination strategy. This is appalling, especially when almost all of the elderly and aged care residents in Victoria are now vaccinated, at least with one jab. Remember, this virus is near enough to harmless to the young and the healthy, nothing more than a mild or moderate risk to the middle-aged, and only a real threat to the elderly and vulnerable. And most of them are vaccinated now. That's our breakthrough. Yet Labor plunges Victoria into lockdown again. Make no mistake, all the data, all the experience tells us the last lockdown in Melbourne in February was completely unnecessary. It did nothing to control the outbreak. It was superfluous. Pain for the community, but no gain. The experts told us this at the time, and this is not some sort of right-wing conspiracy argument or just my opinion. Here are the findings as reported in the 9 media newspapers earlier this week with a headline about how lockdowns don't crush anything. Their analysis of state-by-state responses showed that of 17 outbreaks since December, 6 triggered lockdowns, while 6 were managed by restrictions and 5 just with contact tracing. Of the 6 lockdowns, 4 didn't find any cases not already isolated through contact tracing. So the only lockdowns that helped at all were the Northern Beaches lockdown in Sydney, just for a small part of the city, and the Princess Alexandra Hospital lockdown across Brisbane. This makes clear that Melbourne's last lockdown was a horrible waste of time, a political panic that did nothing to control the outbreak. Now, these findings were endorsed by leading epidemiologists. You've heard them on this program often, including Professors Catherine Bennett and Peter Collignon. Yet now, with just 25 cases, and yes, there's bound to be more, but at the moment, just 25 linked cases, the whole of Victoria is locked down. Mildura, Horsham, Wangaratta, why? Let alone Melbourne itself. It's cruel, unnecessary and dumb. And the acting Premier, incredibly, tries to blame Canberra.
If we had an alternative to hotel for this particular variant of concern, we would not be here today. If we had the Commonwealth's vaccine program effectively rolled out, we may well not be here today.
This is pathetic, and the facts put the lie to it. But most in the media still parrot this nonsense. And even the federal opposition leader was out within minutes of the lockdown trying to score political points from the pain inflicted on Victorians.
My heart goes out to everyone in Victoria going into lockdown today. You've been through this before, and I know that the next period is going to be tough for so many. As you know, this outbreak began in hotel quarantine in Adelaide. It's the 17th outbreak from hotel quarantine. And the truth is, you should never have been put in this situation, because the federal government should have fixed quarantine many months ago.
That is about as low and as desperate a political attack as you could imagine. Using the pandemic and the shambolic response in Victoria, exploiting people's fears and using misinformation to make a partisan attack on the federal government. Just such a lack of leadership. Scott Morrison, on the other hand, can't say what I've just said. He's got to try and maintain national unity.
Right now, every support is being provided to the Victorian government that they have sought, and that has not only included the additional vaccines, which the Health Minister indicated yesterday. We have 218 ADF personnel who are in Victoria continuing to provide support under Operation COVID Assist. And I've made it very clear to the Premier that any other additional support that he requires, then he will receive, and he's indicated to me that he's seeking nothing further from the Commonwealth at this time.
So he's offering help, including talking about new quarantine facilities. That's leadership. So what are the facts? Well, the facts are that we will have coronavirus outbreaks in this country for years to come, maybe forever. But for now, they will all be traced to hotel quarantine. That's axiomatic. That's the only way the virus can get in. And this scheme has been an outstanding success, except for when Victoria totally botched it last year through sheer incompetence. But hotel quarantine is actually the only reason we're in a great situation in this country. So it's no good blaming hotel quarantine. No system can completely stop a contagious virus, and our scheme has been 99.9% effective. The system works. It's the envy of the world. The only question is how states with the virus, how the states deal with the virus when it inevitably escapes on occasions. Now, New South Wales has processed more than 125,000 people through hotel quarantine, more than 4 times what Victoria has handled, let alone South Australia and others. And New South Wales has combated challenging outbreaks, but it's not locked down the state or a whole city once. So if this is a federal problem, how come New South Wales has shouldered the lion's share of the national hotel quarantine burden, had more than its share of outbreaks, but's been able to handle it without major lockdowns, without curfews and border closures and panic and alarm and crushing communities and slamming businesses and trashing casual workers? If you want to blame Canberra, why has New South Wales succeeded with far greater challenges and Victoria has failed? It's a ludicrous proposition. This is obvious to anyone prepared to examine the facts. I discussed it with the New South Wales Premier just 2 days ago.
I fear for Victoria and I worry about what their government may do. I just feel that New South Wales has been down this path a number of times. We take forward the learnings we get, and I hope we've demonstrated to other states that it is possible to manage an outbreak and not shut down a city and not stop businesses and not stop people being employed and not stop people having a relatively normal existence. We've always tried to make sure in New South Wales we don't burden our citizens with anything unless we absolutely have to. And I hope we've demonstrated our ability to do that, and I hope it's an example to other states that it is possible to manage an outbreak without causing grief to the vast majority of your public.
Yeah, it can be done, and it has been done repeatedly. And those pushing for new quarantine camps in the bush or blaming Canberra are exposed as being horribly partisan, happy to use a pandemic to play political games. And another thing, nearly 4 million vaccine jabs have been administered in Australia. It's going up by 70,000 or more doses a day. And the priority has been the elderly and those in aged care facilities. In other words, even if the virus was widespread now, the chances of it doing a lot of damage has been dramatically reduced. Most of the people who would have gotten very sick and been at risk have now been vaccinated. Remember, more than 80% of the deaths in Victoria last year were in aged care homes, and now nearly all those residents have been vaccinated. Yet panic, lockdown, pain and political protection are the go today. And we have the pathetic spectacle of a Victorian Labor Premier trying to blame Canberra. And Albo is joining in. Low politics and sad days. Nearly 18 months into this pandemic, a lot of people have learned bugger all.